Chapter 14. Return of the Summit Party. We rested first, having our sleep out. Then, with returning in energy, we became active again, each in his own way. Wish collated his many readings and announced with pride that they were proving of the greatest importance. Jungle was profitably employed in surveying the area. Unfortunately, he lost himself every day and had to be rescued at great inconvenience to the rest of us. This became so irksome that we appointed a porter to be his guardian, giving him strict instructions to bring Jungle back to camp at dusk. One evening they had not returned by nightfall, and Shoot sent up a number of flares, brought for photographic purposes, to guide them. One of the flares fell on Wish's tent and burned it to the ground, together with his records. Wish was distracted. All of his work had gone up in flames. Having boiled all the mercury out of his thermometers, he could take no more readings, and the remainder of his equipment was on the summit of Doodle. He had been unable to find any living creature on the mountain. This line of research had also come to nothing. There was only one hope to justify his presence. He must concentrate all his energies on the search for Warples. Since Shoot had no work of his own, all of his film being spoiled and his lenses cracked, Wish conscripted him for the search. Burley was also enlisted. He was now fully acclimatized and as fit and active as a schoolboy, and fairly wore out both Wish and Shoot on the daily Warple hunt. Constant, insatiable as ever in his desire to improve his knowledge of the language, spent much time with the porters. At other times he was to be found wandering about the glacier, practicing grunts, gurgles, and other phenomena which are the backbone of spoken Yogastani. It was the general opinion, he said, that Yogastani was unpronounceable to the Western stomach, and it was his great ambition to prove that this was a fallacy. He was, Lai told me, within hearing of success. He had developed unmistakable symptoms of the permanent gastritis which is hypodermic amongst the Yogastani due to their speaking from the stomach. Burley was unkind enough to suggest that if Constant had gotten a stomach ache at the right time, Prone would not now be marooned on the summit of Doodle. And we reminded him that but for this accident we would have failed in our purpose, and I congratulated Constant on his gastritis. It was, by the way, interesting to notice that as this complaint increased in severity, Constant became more and more immune to the effects of Pong's cooking, began even to enjoy it. He put forward the theory that Yogastani method of cooking provides a counter-irritant to the indigenous indigestion pains. However that might be, it seemed to work in his ease. It was unfortunate that on returning to civilization he found himself quite unable to stomach Western cooking. For weeks he lived on a starvation diet while he experimented with every conceivable mixture of ill-assorted foodstuffs and every possible method of rendering them indigestible. Finally, when on the verge of committing suicide by eating pre-digested, invalidated food, he conceived the happy idea of employing a Yogastani cook. He had once set off cables in all directions, one of which, by great good fortune, reached Pong. Owing to the difficulty of transmitting grunts and gurgles and so on by cable, as well as to the objections by Pong's trade union, the negotiations were prolonged, and Constant nearly succumbed to indigestion complicated by excitement. But matters were arranged at last. Pong is now installed at Constant's Hempstead flat. Almost any time of day they may be found grunting and gurgling together in the kitchen as they gloat over some malevolent mess which is burning on the bottom of a disgusting saucepan, or huddled in ecstasy over bowls of the same atrocity. When I last saw him, Constant was smoking a pipe of skunk which he found served the same purpose of counter-irritant as Pong's cooking. But I anticipate. During this anxious time at base camp, when the fate of poor Prone was as yet unknown to us, I was once more heartened and inspired by the devoted way in which my companions went about their tasks, allowing no personal grief to interfere with duty. I forced myself to take part in all activities, social and otherwise, and found that in helping to lighten the burden of others, I had also eased my own. I had for some time been eager to learn something about Shoot's fiancée, but now that opportunity presented itself, I was at a loss of how to broach the subject, not knowing what tender susceptibilities might be involved. One afternoon I was sitting alone in the mess tent, composing a letter of condolences for Prone's father, when Shoot strolled in. He said, at a loose end. Did I mind if he showed me some snaps? I said I should be delighted. He produced several photographs of a nice-looking young lady whom he said was his fiancée. They were to be married soon after his return. I congratulated him and wished him on every happiness. He thanked me. I said that his fiancée looked a very nice young lady. He said that she was the nicest and dearest person in the world. He told me quite a lot about her, and it all sounded very happy and very normal. He asked me if he was boring me, and I said no, but was there not some drawback to his happiness? He said no. Why should there be? I said it often happened. Perhaps he had had an unhappy experiences before meeting his fiancée. He said no. They had been childhood sweethearts. There had never been anyone else. Why did I ask? I said that somehow I had expected something different. He looked at me rather suspiciously, I thought, and he said he was sorry to disappoint me. I at once assured him that he had mistaken my meaning and asked him to tell me more, which he did, and more than satisfied my curiosity. His fiancée, evidently, was a normal and contented a person as he was himself. I could see that they would have a very happy life together. I asked him what they did on Sunday afternoons. He told me that they visited his fiancée's elderly aunt who was bedridden. I noticed that the daily belch with which Pong and Solo greeted me on the mountain had spread to the other porters. I asked Constant if he knew what it meant. He said that since Yogastani was spoken from the stomach, the belch, which was the stomach's sign of ultimate contentment, was used as an expression of respect. It indicated great pleasure with the belcher, found at being in the illustrious presence of the belchee. This pleased me greatly, not only because I appreciated the honor, but because it confirmed my faith in Pong and in human nature. I wished that time and my duties would allow me to make friends with each of the porters. What with a wealth of affection must, I thought, be hidden by their unresponsive manner. I spent much time with Pong, who told me many interesting things about his life. Poor fellow seemed to have developed a great affection for me. He told Constant that that was only person who had ever been kind to him without expecting something in return. This touched me deeply. He also developed the habit of bringing me little offerings of food at all hours of the day. This touched me deeply, too. After some days of careful thought, I sent off the following dispatch. Expedition more than successful. Having climbed both Doodles, all in good health and spirits. The spirit of the team is excellent and the porters are beyond praise. I inadvertently signed this message Binder instead of with my proper name. This caused some perplexity at home, and the dispatch was at first considered to be a hoax. Then the rumor went around that we had been forestalled on the mountain by some unknown party under the leadership of one Binder. Inquiries were made in the mountaineering circles, but no clue could be found. The affair caused considerable excitement, the national press making the most of it. It was not cleared up until our arrival at Chaikahosi, where we were inundated with telegrams from all parts of the world and had to employ 3 secretaries to deal with them. One of the secretaries turned out to be a practical joker named Pluk, who made the most of an unparalleled opportunity and had the world's press at its wit ends by issuing foolish and contradictory statements. We had to employ 6 extra secretaries to clear up the confusion he caused. But again, I anticipate. As the days passed and no sign was seen of Prone, I became more and more worried. Heaven alone knew what torments the poor fellow was enduring, if indeed he was still alive. At last I could stand it no longer. I called the others to the mess tent and said something must be done. Someone must go up the mountain. The question was, who? They all looked at each other, but no one spoke. This made me feel very humble. My dear chaps, I said, I know you all want to go, but someone must stay behind. I feel it my responsibility. I hope you won't consider it selfish if I go. There was silence. Then Burley looked at me keenly and said in his deepest voice, By heavens, Minder, I believe you would. I looked at him in surprise. He seemed for some reason to be overcome by emotion. If you go, he said at last, I go. At that moment the tent door was flung open and in walked Prone. A new Prone, an erect Prone, a thin but healthy-looking Prone, a Prone with a broad smile and a swagger. Prone, the hero of Rum Doodle, the man who had been higher than anyone else, for as Wish pointed out, Prone stood head and shoulders higher than any of the porters. What a reunion it was! What laughter! What backslapping! What wrestling and practical jokes! When we were all exhausted, Prone said, As medical officer to this expedition, I prescribe champagne. Where's the medical equipment? At this, a silence fell upon us. The others looked sheepish and nudged each other to speak. At last, Burley said, "The fact is, old boy, there's no champagne." "No champagne?" Prone was horrified. "No, you see, we, didn't bring it back from Camp 1. But nothing could dampen our spirits that day. In the absence of a more stimulating beverage, cocoa was made. We were soon laughing again, telling and retelling our adventures. Everybody wanted to talk, none to listen. "Do you remember," said Chute, smiling, "how Binder got stuck to the glacier by his tears?" "And had Pong all to himself for a week," said Wish, chuckling. "And couldn't find Camp 1, laughed Juggle, and had to have number 8 sent up," added Constant, holding his sides. We all roared. All of a sudden, Burley jumped up. "Stop it," he cried. He banged on the table. The laughter stopped at once. The mood changed instantaneously. We waited in tense silence for Burley to speak. Wish giggled nervously, then coughed and turned red. Burley was frowning. He fist-thumped the table. He seemed to be struggling with words. "There's something that needs saying," he said at last. Then he fell silent again, and we waited. "A lot of things," he continued, "have happened on this expedition. And before it started, which seemed very appropriate at the time." He stopped again. He was evidently choosing his words carefully. He banged on the table. I wished now they had never happened. What on earth, I wondered, was the dear fellow talking about? "I myself," he was saying, "have been guilty as anyone else, probably more so." I noticed that the others were exchanging glances and looking sheepish again. What was it all about? "Just now," Burley went on, "old Binder here was about to go to Prone's rescue. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget also that Binder has already done 10 times as much work as the rest of us put together and carried the whole responsibility for the climb. We had already been 35,000 feet while we were wallowing at Camp 1, yet he was the chap who was going to climb Doodle to bring Prone back." This was embarrassing. We had all done our best. I had perhaps been more fortunate than the others, but the luck might easily have been different. I tried to interrupt Burley, but he put his hand on my shoulder. "No," he said, "let me finish." He looked at the others, each in turn. "I will now, gentlemen, propose that the health of our leader, the most conscientious, the most modest, the most unselfish man I have ever climbed with, and he has more guts than any of us," he added. "And those absurd fellows drank my health and cocoa. Next moment, they were all trying to shake my hand at the same time, while Prone was patting me on the back, saying, 'Well done, little man.' This was quite ridiculous. To this day, I'm not sure whether it was another of Burley's feeble jokes."